Hello, my name is Tony Monisse. I'm a director of Brentnalls WA. And today I would just like to share with you some of our experiences of working through with our clients in these difficult and uncertain times. And look, really what I want to talk to you about today is there's a lot of discussion around cash flow and getting through this period, which is a valid discussion, but also really want to highlight it's still important that we don't confuse profit with cash flow. Ultimately, there is going to be payback for businesses if they still do not keep track of where they are in terms of profit. So I'd like to just run through an example of a client that we've been working through with, and which is pretty typical of a lot of discussions we're having with a number of our clients at the moment, just around this differentiation between cash flow and profit. So, if you look at our Prime Minister, he talks about, we need to navigate this bridge. Who knows how long this bridge is going to be? Is it going to be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? But we need to navigate and get to the other side. Now, if you look at this particular client, over the next 12 months, forecasting revenue around $1 million in this particular case. Pretty straightforward, but that's what it anticipates its current revenue levels will look like over the next 12 months. On our first cut and before any adjustment, its expenses come in at $1.6 million. And then on top of those expenses, they've got $100,000 of HP repayments. So what that means is that basically this business over the next 12 months is effectively got an outflow of $1.7 million. And what this translates to is that this business will now need to fund the $1.7 million of outflow, less its $1 million sales. So effectively it's got to fund a cash loss of $700,000. So this is just the initial discussions we're having with this client. Now, what does that mean from a funding perspective? This is the scenario that this particular client's dealing with over the next 12 months. So to fund that $700,000 loss, the client is eligible to the $100,000 stimulus package that the federal government is offering businesses. So 100 of that 700 will be funded by the government in terms of this particular client. But there's also a shortfall that needs to be funded, which is the $600,000 shortfall. And in addition to that, the business over the next 12 months, we anticipate there's going to be a $200,000 working capital requirement. That is, it's going to need to fund debtors and stock, less its creditors over the next 12 months of $200,000, which means that its total funding required over the next 12 months under this particular scenario is $900,000. Now, if you look at the funding of this, the $100,000, well, that's good funding. We'll take that. That will help cut that shortfall. The $200,000 of working capital, that is good funding. On the basis that we can collect our debtors, we can realise our stock, then that's good funding. So that's funding we should be seeking. The question that this business owner needs to make a decision is, are they prepared to fund that $600,000 shortfall over the next 12 months? Even though they can access funding for it, they can get concessions from the bank, they can get concessions from the government, they're still faced with a shortfall of $600,000. So they might have the funds to get through this next period, but ultimately they're going to have to repay it back. And I think that's really the decision that businesses need to make. What is the quantum of that shortfall that they're prepared to accept? In this case, it might not be $600,000. It's how do we get that shortfall down? And so that's one of the things that we need to work through. So what becomes really important is how do we increase sales? How do we reduce our expenses? And ultimately, how do we reduce that cash loss of $700,000 to an amount that is acceptable or tolerable from a business owner's perspective to get through this 6 to 12 month bridge that we need to work on. So what I just want to talk to you about now is, maybe what are some of those strategies that a business can talk about? Because certainly on our first cut with this client, there is no way that they want to have to pay at the end of the $700,000 that shortfall. So what we're now working through and what we've been working through with this client is some of the strategies. So the first strategy is, what are the opportunities to grow sales? If you look at this, if you look at a typical business, they sell existing products and service to existing customers. There's the opportunity to move into new segments, new customers, and also there's the opportunity to move into new products and services. So the really innovative businesses are looking at how they can grow revenue in different ways in this current market. But if I was just to focus on your existing customers and your existing products and services, the most important thing I think is to focus on relationships, your existing relationships with your existing customers. The most important thing and the lowest risk thing and the easiest thing for a business to do is to retain its existing customers and look at how it can rejig, redo the business's offer still to retain that business with the existing customers. You know, what are the ways it can add value, change its offer, still to retain that customer? So relationships become really important in that first box. The next thing is, well, maybe there is other products that can move to. And look, there's some really innovative stuff that's out there. I mean, there was a story about a brewery in Queensland that is now using some of its vats to produce hand sanitizer. I mean, talk about finding new products, but basically saw an opportunity in the market, is now producing hand sanitizer from its brewing equipment. Similarly, on the other side, there might be the opportunity to offer new products and services. So again, the innovative businesses, you know, we're seeing that with all the restaurants moving to home delivery. There's a lot of training businesses that are moving to online. So where are the opportunities to offer new products and services in your business? So again, you know, how can we innovate? Where are the opportunities? And lastly is, do we need to move into new markets with new customers? And again, I'll put that as a question mark. You know, that's a higher risk strategy, but maybe there's opportunities out there that businesses need to look at. The next thing, so we talked about sales. The next thing is we need to protect profit. You know, really critical that all businesses look at non-essential expenditure in the current market and defer or remove any non-essential expenditure. The other thing too is look at the supply chain. Look at the way the business is producing its products or services. Are there smarter ways to deliver those products and services that can take out cost or can eliminate waste that previously existed? So again, businesses need to look at the supply opportunities to innovate around their supply chain. Obviously very important is to retain staff. You know, where are the opportunities? You know, we want to keep our good staff at the other end of this once we get through this funnel, you know, over this bridge. So where are the opportunities to retain staff? You know, maybe it's a case of looking at, you know, different working arrangements, and I think there's been a lot of discussion around this, and I don't really need to add to that, but, you know, whether employees reduce their hours, whatever other options there are to keep staff, the important staff that you need to get through this period of time. And lastly, rent. Again, pretty well documented, but there's, you know, a number of scenarios where businesses are currently negotiating with their landlords to either get rent-free periods, deferring rent, whatever that sort of looks like. So we talk about sales, increasing sales. We talk about how we can increase profit. The last thing is the funding, the cash flow, which is we talked about. And again, this is where I think we've got to be really, really careful, because we don't want to confuse the fact that we've got access to this funding with the fact that we're still losing money. So probably most importantly, you know, businesses need to stay focused on their working capital. Where are the opportunities to, you know, you need to stay focused on the collection of your trade debtors. You need to stay focused on moving your stock. You don't want to be caught holding stock. And lastly, you need to have those discussions with your trade creditors. Just as you're having discussions with your trade debtors around the collection, and again, I think this is a time where we're going to have to work through this with all our customers because we still want to keep the goodwill at the other side. But similarly, we're going to have that same discussion with our trade creditors and get that same return of goodwill in terms of our suppliers. Our experiences, we're finding that the ATO is very accommodating with arrangements, with in terms of payments, whether it's obviously there's been a number of announcements in that space, and similarly, you know, the state government and the various utilities are also being very accommodating in allowing businesses get through this sort of period of time. But again, let's not confuse these arrangements we're coming to with the state government, the federal government, the utilities, because ultimately we still need to pay these things back. We still need to fund, you know, what is our trading result over this period. The last thing is banks, and again we're seeing a number of examples where the banks, you know, we're seeing freezes on bank payments, renegotiation of bank facilities. Obviously, the government has put out a stimulus package to the banks where they can fund up to, you know, 50% of the loans to many small businesses, up to $250,000, which avails itself to small business. But again, you know, what's really important is that we still need to make profit or minimise our losses during this period, because ultimately the banks, the ATO, need to be paid back. So just to summarise, what are the key actions? Keep on top of your numbers. Forecast what is the best case scenario, the worst case, and the expected outcomes. And be prepared to take action under those different scenarios. But that forecast not only needs to look at cash flow, it needs to look at profit. Because at the end of the day, we still need to mitigate or make profit to get through this sort of period. As we said, what's most important is you need to protect your employees. We want to get to the other side. We still want to keep our workforce intact, our employees intact, because we're going to need to be able to work those employees going forward. And lastly, you need to protect your business. So, you need to be mindful of that. Look, if you need assistance, if you're struggling with this concept of cash flow versus profit, seek help from your accountant or your advisor. And if you're struggling getting the sort of support, your assistance, then we're more than happy to have a chat. Thank you for your time, and keep focused on profit and cash flow.